Um,
Hi everyone, welcome to Planet Health Project. This is episode 10 and I'm so lucky to be here with Brad Parkinson, a naturopath and herbalist in Sydney. And today we're going to talk about herbs and particularly immune herbs. And Brad's going to share his wisdom with all of you and let's get started talking about immune herbs, Brad. So how are you today, Brad?
yeah, good. Thanks, Shannon. Great to be here. What a fantastic topic to talk about, because this is something I really enjoy delving into. As a herbalist, it's an important part of our naturopathic practice, and it's quite an effective part of our naturopathic practice too.
You betcha. And the magic of herbs. So we're going to talk about immune herbs, but what are they? And just give us kind of a bit of a foundation of why they're different to pharmaceutical medicines and what's the magic behind them.
Yeah, well, look, really what they are basically any herb that supports the immune system. Or directly they support the immune system. They can have antimicrobial effects, antiviral effects, etc. But they also can support the immune system indirectly too, when we talk about like our adaptogen herbs that help us deal with stress, and modulate the stress response. And the stress response, raising cortisol, especially for prolonged periods, can really affect the immune system negatively. So a lot of these adaptogen herbs now are showing lots of good immune qualities. And you could really put into that equation all your mushroom-based herbal remedies, your reishis, your shiitakes, your cordyceps would come into that as well, and we're getting some really good clinical studies getting done on some of these herbs. And there's a lot of traditional Chinese medicine herbal remedies that contain things like astragalus and other herbs that getting a lot of research done on them too. And the more research that tends to get done on herbal medicine, the greater the results we get. We find more and more benefits from these herbs. And really what differentiates the herbal medicines from pharmaceutical medicines is the fact that when you do have herbal medicines, you quite often get a plethora of other benefits in conjunction to just, so for example, we're talking about immune herbs here, and you could put something like so you could use actually rosemary, which is probably not traditionally considered an immune herb, but it has high amounts of quercetin and also has very good control of allergies, and something I put into herbs. Herb mixes, and that can have benefits on the liver, benefits in the as a circulatory stimulant, and also cognitive function, because of these what we call, I guess we call them antioxidant properties, but they're technically redox agents, but they have protective effects and can reduce inflammation. So look, there's just and when we look at perhaps the most common pharmaceutical drugs that are used for immune function are antibiotics, and I think there's just mounting evidence that they can have negative effects, certainly warranted in certain situations, especially if someone's very sick and has a bacterial complication. The antibiotics, especially administered through IV, if need be, can be very effective at turning someone's health around if they're in a lot of trouble there. But the overuse of them, especially when people or doctors are prescribing them for viral viruses and so forth that people are dealing with, colds or flus, and they've been given administered all these antibiotics, can be very detrimental to the overall health of society, and we're seeing resistant strains of bacteria and so forth. So very different, and it's a very holistic approach with herbal medicine. When we do administer specific herbs for the treatment of a viral infection or bacterial or even parasitic infection, we're considering the whole picture of the the person that we're administering these herbs to, and we've got quite a few options to choose from. And we might be, in addition to that, we might be trying to manage their stress at the same time as well. So we might combine different herbs to be able to manage their stress, give them that bit of relief, maybe to pick their energy up. Also, we can induce things like a fever as well, if we think that's going to be beneficial in certain circumstances. We can also administer herbs that can reduce the onset of a fever too. So there's numerous things we can do with a huge variety of different herbs available to us.
Mm-hmm. That's brilliant, and there's so much in there, and we could talk for hours. Yeah, and I guess I'd add also, like the herbs behind me, we can individualize it for the patient in front of us. So we're not just using one herb, or we're not using a particular formulation, but we're thinking, and then we should put a little bit of stress adaptation in there, and we should, like you say, with the fever, and they're not sleeping well. And there are particular herbs that will do a combination of effects and actions.
Yep,
yeah,
definitely.
And probably also just adding as well the complexity of the herb. It's hard for science to. So commonly people will say, well, herbs don't work, they don't have anything in it. And if you're to boil it down to what is the constituent in the herb that's having the effect, it's not that simple, because you touched on rosemary having quercetin. Well, is it really just the quercetin that's helping the immune system? No, it's a combination of things, and the essential oils and the action on the liver. Yeah, so just let's go over just a little bit about the specific actions of some of the herbs. Can you shed a little bit more light on that?
Yeah, definitely. Look, immune modulating is a big part of the immune herbs. So what is that exactly? It's really balancing the immune system. We know there's T helper 1, T helper 2, T regulatory cells, T17, and we're learning more and more information about this, pro-inflammatory cytokines. So these are all chemical mediators within the immune response that the herbs can specifically target and we understand. I think going back on something you were saying about particularly specific chemicals doing certain things, we are having a better understanding of that, but it always goes full circle, and we come back to understanding and appreciate that the herb in its purest form, that we can extract it, and with in the background shot of you've got all your liquid herbs there, which we find to be one of the most effective forms of delivering herbs. They always find in studies that it's not just the curcuminoids, or it's not just the particular constituents that they sometimes standardize these herbs with, that it's doing the job. It's in addition with all the antioxidants and everything else in there, always seems to have better outcomes. So this is why we get so much variation in studies as well, because the herbs, really, when we look at a lot of the research, particularly older research, it can be all over the shop, the quality of these herbs. So, but something like immune modulating is really important, balancing the immune system. And even our herbs that have what we use in autoimmune conditions as such, we're finding out that they don't just dampen the immune system, which was originally thought. They tend to balance it as well. So, and then we have immune enhancing herbs that can, I guess, increase certain activities of the immune system as well. And we have antibacterial, antimicrobial, antiseptic, so they can go in there and potentially, if people are overrun with bacteria, some people have high levels. When we get stool testing back and so forth, we can down-regulate those levels, and then come in with probiotics after that, and and then really get that balance right, that microbial balance, and getting the microbiome sorted. So there's those actions. And then, as I touched on with rosemary, anti-allergenic actions too, things like albizia, Bicol skullcap, and so forth. So you
So
can...
many.
Yeah, there's so many, and these herbs are fantastic at reducing that allergenic response too. So yeah, there's plenty of actions there, and antiviral as well. So and this is one of the key strengths of herbs, because modern medicine or conventional medicine doesn't seem to have a good answer for viral infections, whereas we're now getting we've got a lot of good herbs that have antiviral actions, and we're now finding out more and more research. Even things as garlic's got research on antiviral action. Things like propolis, thuya, and there's many different herbs. The more they get explored, the more we're finding out, hey, these herbs have benefits on viral infections as well. And in addition to antiviral action, they might be balancing the immune system as a whole. They might be balancing the gut microflora, and then they might even be affecting the stress response too, if we're looking at some of these adaptogenic herbs like your schisandras and rhodiols and so forth.
Mm-hmm. And then there's also this, you've touched on that a couple of times, about the synergy of the herbs in the bottle, and we can, and usually in patients there are concurrent infections, so they may have an old lurking hepatitis virus or a Epstein-Barr, or and then they might have a bacteria, some stealth pathogen or antibiotic resistant one, and they slowly become weaker and their immune system gets weaker as well. So we can work on across the whole board.
Yes, yeah,
and help lift them up.
Yep, that's a great point.
Yeah. And so maybe that can take us into the third point about how can we use these herbs and how can people use herbs the best way? What's your recommendations?
Yeah, look, I think modulating the immune system is a great way for autoimmune conditions, and that's what I often do. And I take in consideration other aspects of the individual, and I think it's always important, and perhaps we don't hammer this home enough to our listeners, is that we treat the person, not just the condition and not just the pathologies we're seeing. So we're always taking that in consideration when we use our herbs as a whole. And there's a lot of traditional evidence that can sometimes guide us into picking one herb over another when we use them to treat the immune system. One of the other things we mentioned was allergies as well. So there's several herbs, and again, depending on what outcome is best for that individual, you might combine different anti-allergenic herbs with an immune modulating, again with the stress, or quite often with sleep as well, which you touched on before. Another thing that I think these herbs do incredibly well, or herbs do incredibly well, is as a preventative work on building the immune system, and they sort of enhance the immune system, and you've got this protective action. And some of these exact herbs can also be used post-virally. And I think this is a huge thing, because post-viral fatigue is really huge when someone suffered even a bad cold, and especially if they've had the influenza, or they've suffered the glandular fever as well. So that's another thing to consider too, is how do we pick the person back up from when they've really been really put down so badly with a bad infection over a long period of time. How do we get them out of that rut? And these post-viral actions of these herbs can be really fantastic. And something else to touch on too is something like shingles, which is a virus within the nervous system too. The herbs can actually help benefit that and target that specifically. The herpes virus and so forth as well can be targeted specifically too. And in different forms, we've got the liquid herbs, we've got the herbal teas. which I think don't get enough credit, mainly because people really think of the herbal teas just dunking a tea bag in a cup for a minute or less, and then going, yeah, that tastes nice. Doesn't really give me any benefit. Well, that's because you're not doing it correctly. We need to steep our teas for at least 15 minutes for the leaf and flower, and at least 20 minutes for your barks and rhizomes and roots. So if people use herbal teas in that manner, they can be really effective. And it's quite often what I recommend for a lot of children. They brew up a tea where you might be using, whether you're using your chamomiles, or in this case immune herbs is like echinacea or so forth, and you brew it up, you do your 20 minutes or more, and then you put it in the fridge. You put it with a bit of manuka honey or something, and it can be fantastic for the kids. Really good for their immune systems. So yeah, there's plenty of ways to use them. Essential oils too. You could touch on something like lemon balm for herpes virus as well. So yeah, there's many ways to use the herbs, and they're incredibly effective.
Yeah, excellent. And just to add there, it's about quality as well. At the Woolworths, my son used to get Lipton. Well, one day he said, "Oh, I want this Lipton tea bag," and we got it home and we looked on the back, and surprisingly, it had a lot of flavouring and colouring, and it was a raspberry lemon or something, and it didn't even have lemon in it.
No.
I called the hotline, and they said it was a proprietary blend. So it's not really herbal. But maybe we'll end with some tips. So what tips would you give people who are wanting to use herbs, and what can they do to get the maximum benefit from them?
Yeah, look, I think it's very important to meet your nutritional needs, because these herbs work a lot better once your nutritional needs are met. And things like your zinc, vitamin D, vitamin A, which are all immune modulating nutrients, basically. These things should be at adequate levels. Vitamin C, a lot of people, as soon as they think cold, they go and hammer the vitamin C. My belief on that is, you should have vitamin C constantly coming into your system through fresh fruit and veg, and I think that's very important. And if you've got that sort of going on, then that vitamin C is usually covered. I think most people usually lack zinc as a big nutrient deficiency when they're sick, and zinc quite often can turn things around. Even adequate protein as well in the diet, because or the immune system needs the amino acids or proteins specifically to function properly. And something like lysine, amino acid from protein, is very beneficial at contributes to an antiviral activity, especially if people are having high amounts of chocolate and caffeine and these things that might promote high levels of arginine. So yeah, that's a few tips there nutrient-wise. But one of my favourite things to advise many patients is crushed fresh garlic. Something easily accessible at home. It's got to be fresh, not cooked. We've got to get the allicin from the garlic, which combines a couple of the ingredients. Once it's crushed, it forms the allicin, and when that's fresh and we consume that, it has a lot of immune properties, a lot of other good health benefits too, for cardiovascular health, but definitely even antiviral research there's been on garlic as well, but certainly antimicrobial, antibacterial, and very good. Not so good for the breath, but I think when people are really up against it, you can have the harsh breath, at least in the evening or something, and crush your garlic up, have it on a bit of toast with avocado, or in with your favorite yogurt, and consume it that way as well. So
health's more important. Health's number one.
Right. Yep.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Brad. So let's wrap it up, Brad. And so for people watching out there, where can they find you?
Find me at www.bradparkinson.com.au, or Brad Parkinson Naturopath on Facebook. I'm all over that.
And so feel free to leave any comments below, and jump on our Facebook page, Planet Health Project. And thanks for watching.
Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye.